Welcome, deep divers. Ready to explore the fascinating world of Christmas fashion? We're going on a journey through time, from ancient traditions to modern trends.
I'm excited to dive in. We'll uncover how Christmas style has evolved over the centuries, reflecting the changing culture and sometimes even politics.
From medieval feasts to, well, those infamous ugly Christmas sweaters. Get ready for some surprises.
Definitely. Clothing can tell us so much about a society's values, not just their sense of style.
Exactly. So let's start with the medieval and Renaissance periods. Imagine a Christmas feast back then, say around the 10th century. What would people be wearing?
Picture a grand hall, flickering candlelight. If you were among the elite, you'd be draped in luxurious robes, probably velvet or fur.
So even back then, fashion was a status symbol.
Oh, absolutely. Those robes weren't just about warmth. They were a display of wealth and power.
And I bet they incorporated religious imagery too, given the church's influence.
You're right. Tapestries and clothing often featured biblical scenes or symbols, reflecting the religious significance of the holiday.
So a very different look from our modern Christmas gatherings. What about the common folk? Were they rocking velvet too?
Not quite. For most people, it was all about practicality. Think sturdy wool garments, designed for warmth and hard work.
A reminder of the stark class divide of the time. Makes our modern-day fashion anxiety seem a bit trivial.
Well, every era has its own fashion pressures.
Sure enough.
Oh.
Okay, now let's fast forward a few centuries to the Victorian era, a period that really shaped our modern Christmas traditions.
Yes. The Victorians embraced Christmas with a newfound enthusiasm, thanks in large part to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. They popularized the Christmas tree, family gatherings, and of course, festive fashion.
So, what was the look for a Victorian Christmas?
For women, elegance was key. Think elaborate gowns, often with full skirts, cinched waists, and intricate details like lace or embroidery.
I've heard those corsets were quite the challenge to breathe in.
Well, comfort wasn't always the priority back then.
I guess beauty is pain, as they say.
Yeah.
What about the men? Were they equally decked out?
Men's attire was more restrained, but still formal. A typical gentleman might wear a tailcoat, a waistcoat, and of course, the iconic top hat.
I can practically picture those Victorian families gathered around the Christmas tree, looking like they stepped out of a Dickens novel.
It's a very distinct image, isn't it?
And speaking of iconic Victorian touches, did any of their fashion choices survive into modern Christmas style?
Absolutely. The Victorians loved their plaid, especially tartan. Think scarves, blankets, even those iconic Christmas stockings.
It's amazing how certain patterns become so ingrained in our holiday imagery.
It's a testament to the power of tradition, I suppose.
Now, as we enter the 20th century, a time of immense change and upheaval, how did Christmas fashion adapt?
Well, the early 1900s brought about a shift towards simplicity and practicality, partly due to the impact of World War I and the subsequent economic downturn.
So less frills, more function. Did that mean people were toning down the Christmas spirit too?
Not necessarily. While extravagance took a back seat, people still found ways to celebrate through fashion.
I see. So what were the key trends for women's fashion during this period?
Think tailored dresses with clean lines and subtle details like fur collars or beading. Still elegant, but less fussy than those Victorian gowns.
A more modern silhouette then. And for men?
Men's suits also became less structured, with a focus on comfort and ease of movement.
So Christmas fashion was becoming more relaxed. Did this shift influence gift-giving too?
Absolutely. Handmade gifts, especially knitwear, became increasingly popular.
Those cozy sweaters and scarves. A perfect blend of practicality and personal touch.
Exactly. Handmade gifts represented a thoughtful alternative to store-bought items, especially during times of economic hardship.
So even in a time of global challenges, people found ways to keep the Christmas spirit alive through their fashion choices and gift-giving traditions.
That's the beauty of tradition, isn't it? It adapts and evolves, but the core sentiment remains.
But the world was about to experience another major upheaval, World War II. And that's going to have an impact on everything, fashion included. How did Christmas style reflect the post-war era?
Well, the mid-20th century brought a resurgence of glamour and celebration as people embraced a newfound sense of optimism and prosperity. Ready for some sparkle?
I'm all ears.
Think tea-length dresses, cinched waists, and bold patterns. This era was all about femininity and elegance, but with a touch of playfulness. Imagine those classic holiday films with actresses like Grace Kelly or Audrey Hepburn.
I'm picturing holiday parties, cocktail dresses, and a general air of sophistication. Was it all about formal wear, though?
Not entirely. Casual wear also embraced the festive spirit. Men often sported comfortable sweaters or sport coats. Think of those iconic images of families gathered around the Christmas tree, everyone looking relaxed and stylish.
The classic holiday card photo. And speaking of sweaters, is this when we start seeing the emergence of the holiday sweater?
You're on the right track. The mid-20th century was indeed the birth of the holiday sweater, but not quite in the ugly sense we know it today.
So what were these early holiday sweaters like?
They were often hand-knitted, featuring cozy and stylish patterns like reindeer, snowflakes, or even Santa Claus motifs.
A far cry from the flashing lights and tinsel we see on some sweaters today. But that evolution from cozy to kitschy is a story for another time, I think.
Agreed. That deserves its own deep dive. But as we head into the 1970s and 80s, get ready for a fashion roller coaster.
I'm intrigued. Disco balls meet Christmas trees. I can't wait to hear more.
Oh, you won't be disappointed. But for now, we'll have to pause our journey.
All right, Deep Divers, we'll be back soon with more tales of Christmas fashion. Stay tuned.
We left off on the cusp of a major style shift. The 1970s and 80s fashion really shook things up.
Ready for the wild ride? I'm picturing bell-bottoms and maybe a little disco fever under the mistletoe. So where do we start with the 70s?
Think a little less disco ball, a little more bohemian vibe.
Okay, so more like a cozy cabin in the woods.
Exactly. Flowing maxi dresses, earthy tones, a touch of that free-spirited 70s energy.
I can see it now. And velvet made a comeback too, right?
Yes, velvet jackets, wide-leg pants, even headbands.
It's funny how styles from past decades always seem to find their way back into fashion.
It's that cyclical nature of trends. What's old becomes new again. What about the men? Were they embracing the bohemian look too?
Good question. Were they rocking the maxi dresses as well?
Not quite, For men, it was all about casual comfort. Turtlenecks, corduroy pants, even denim started appearing at holiday gatherings.
Denim at Christmas. That was a bold move back then.
It was a time of breaking traditions, challenging norms, and that extended to fashion, even for holidays like Christmas.
So a very relaxed, almost anti-establishment vibe for Christmas in the 70s. But then the 80s hit and things went in a completely different direction, right?
Oh, yeah. The 80s were all about going big and bold. Think bright colors, oversized silhouettes, lots of sparkle.
Shoulder pads, sequins, leg warmers, the works. It's hard to imagine that those relatively tame holiday sweaters from the mid-century somehow morphed into the ugly Christmas sweater craze. How did that happen?
It's quite a transformation. Mass-produced sweaters started flooding the market, featuring increasingly elaborate designs, and while some of them were just plain tacky.
So the key ingredient was tacky.
I think the turning point was when people started embracing the irony of it all. They took those over-the-top sweaters and turned them into a source of humor.
It became a deliberate fashion choice to be unfashionable, almost like a rebellion against taking style too seriously.
Exactly. It was a way to poke fun at the seriousness of fashion, to let loose and have some fun during the holidays.
It's fascinating how a trend can emerge from something that's considered bad taste, and it's still going strong.
People love a good, ugly Christmas sweater party. It's become a tradition in itself.
But as we moved into the 90s, things took a turn towards minimalism. Did that put a damper on the holiday spirit?
Not at all. It just found a different way to express itself. The 90s were a reaction against the excesses of the 80s, a shift towards comfort and authenticity.
So grunge meets Christmas. I'm curious to hear how that played out in fashion.
Think cozy knit cardigans, oversized sweaters, a more muted color palette.
That does sound pretty grunge. Were people ditching the holiday sweaters altogether?
Not entirely. While the ugly Christmas sweater might have taken a back seat, cozy knitwear remained a staple.
So, still a focus on comfort, but with a more understated aesthetic.
Exactly. It was a rejection of flashy logos and ostentatious displays, a shift towards quality and simplicity.
A sort of quiet luxury for the holidays.
You could say that.
And as we enter the 21st century, did this minimalist approach stick around, or did we see a return to more extravagant styles?
The 21st century has been a fascinating mix of influences. We have this revival of vintage styles, a growing awareness of sustainability, and of course, the ever-present influence of social media.
So Christmas fashion in the 21st century is a bit of everything.
It really is. We see those classic traditions blending with modern trends and personal touches. It's a very diverse and expressive landscape.
Speaking of trends, has the ugly Christmas sweater made a comeback?
Oh yes, it never really went away. It's become such a beloved tradition. People love those ironic sweaters with all the bells and whistles.
And I've noticed matching family pajamas have become incredibly popular.
Absolutely. Social media has played a big role in that. People love to share those cute photos of everyone in their matching PJs.
It's a very 21st century take on holiday fashion.
It is, and it shows how people are finding new and creative ways to celebrate together. But before we get too caught up in the present day, let's take a step back and look at some of the recurring themes we've seen throughout the history of Christmas fashion.
Sounds good. What are some of the elements that have stood the test of time?
Well, certain colors have always been associated with Christmas no matter the era. Red, green, gold, white. These colors evoke warmth, joy, and celebration.
And we can't forget about those cozy textures. Velvet, knits, sequins, they all add a touch of luxury and festivity.
You're right, and those special touches, the accessories from Santa hats to sparkly brooches, they always complete the look.
It's amazing how certain traditions endure, even as fashion trends come and go.
It's a testament to the enduring spirit of the holidays. But before we wrap up our journey, were there any fashion choices that stood out as particularly unique or maybe even a little bizarre?
Oh, there were definitely some questionable choices along the way. I'm particularly curious about the 80s. Anything memorable come to mind?
Well, the 80s were a time of bold experimentation, to say the least. Remember those Christmas-themed exercise outfits?
Oh yeah, leg warmers with Santa motifs, sweatshirts with giant reindeer. I think we could all agree that some trends are best left in the past.
Perhaps. But even those quirky fashion choices tell us something about the culture of the time.
It's all part of the story, right?
Exactly. Fashion is a reflection of who we are, what we value, even our sense of humor. And Christmas, with all its traditions and festivities, provides a fascinating lens through which to view the evolution of style.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Christmas fashion.
We've journeyed from medieval robes to ugly sweaters and everything in between. It's been a fascinating exploration.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive Deep Divers. We've traveled through centuries of Christmas fashion, from those early medieval robes to the outrageous 80s.
It's amazing how much fashion can reveal about a culture's values and priorities.
Definitely. Like you were saying earlier, those simpler styles of the early 1900s really reflected the challenges of that era. Yet people still found ways to celebrate.
Exactly. Even during times of hardship, the desire to express joy and connection through fashion seems to shine through.
And that creativity and adaptability are still evident in how people approach Christmas fashion today.
Right. We see it in the rise of DIY, the personalized touches, that blend of tradition and individual expression.
It's like taking those time-honored traditions and making them your own, adding a personal touch.
Exactly. It's about finding what resonates with you, what brings you joy, and what allows you to express that holiday spirit authentically.
So whether it's a vintage dress, a cozy sweater, or even an ugly Christmas sweater, there's no one right way to celebrate through style.
It's all about finding what makes you feel festive and confident.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to hear any final thoughts you might have for our listeners.
I'd encourage everyone to really think about what their personal Christmas style says about them. What stories do your clothing choices tell? What traditions do you honor? And what new ones are you creating?
That's a great point. It's not just about the clothes themselves, but the meaning and memories we attach to them, especially during the holidays.
Exactly. And maybe our conversation has sparked some new ideas for your holiday wardrobe.
Perhaps a touch of Victorian elegance, or a dash of 70s bohemian flair. Who knows?
The possibilities are endless. Most importantly, have fun with it and let your personal style shine through.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Christmas fashion.
It's been a pleasure exploring with you. Happy holidays, everyone.
And to all our deep divers, stay curious and keep exploring the world around you. We'll see you next time for another fascinating deep dive.